Well, good morning. Good morning. Last night was bouncing around. Actually, it was late yesterday. Was bouncing around on Twitter. I came across this video, and I wanted to share it with you guys because it got me to thinking a lot about what's going on in the world. You know, people today are suffering. They're broke, and this young woman is sharing her frustration. And so let's go ahead and dive right into it here. Here we go.
Millennials can't afford to buy houses. We got told if you went to school and you got a good job and you graduated, that you would be able to buy your dream home. We were sold this unachievable dream that if you work hard, you get what you want.
And to be fair, you know, like being Gen X, we were sold that dream as well. That's something that I think that has really been part of the American dream. You know, you work hard, you do right. You know, that's not really out of line. So let's continue with what she says.
It seems like no matter how many hours you put in, you're getting nowhere. On top of that, we have student loan debt that we need to pay off. Can't afford a house. We're in debt. The pandemic hit and inflation and food prices increased. Everything is more expensive, but the wages are the same. Forget about health insurance. We can't afford that. We're basically working like we're in 2015, but we can't afford McDonald's now. Boomers had it easy. They could afford a house. And now those 1960 houses are triple the price. Gen X doesn't care. They're like, it is what it is. Work harder. Gen Z doesn't know what's going on with us. And us millennials are the only generation left that cares about the future generations. But we're constantly getting told that we're...
I mean, I'm going to disagree with her here because, you know, a lot of people care. Everybody cares about the world we're living in. She's probably feeling hopeless from where she's at in life, but certainly, you know, their generation isn't the only generation that cares. That's kind of a silly statement.
Spending too much on Starbucks, even though they're shopping at Temu, even though we have 2 jobs. The government doesn't care about us. You want a work-life balance? Not possible. Millennials and Gen Z are going to inherit a system that is broken, and we're going to have to replace it all. And that's why it's important to vote for younger candidates that are in our generation that actually care about what's happening. Because the old white men sitting in the White House don't care about us. So we have to.
And that right there is where I really started to take issue with what she had to say. Oh, the old white men. Well, yeah, you know, there are some old white men that have been around there for quite a while. But I want to really get into why things are so bad right now, why the money's so bad, and what it really boils down to is the amount of inflation we've been going through and everything else, and the amount of spending that we've been doing in our government. And if you really look at the last 10, 12 years of spending with the way the debt has gotten out of control and everything else, there's one person who you can really point to within our government who's to blame, and that's Nancy Pelosi. And let's just listen to her talk when it was coming up on like spending and everything a couple of years ago. This, I believe, was from 2020 or 2021, so she was Speaker of the House at this point.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our latest CBS News poll shows that only about 10% of Americans describe themselves as knowing a lot of specific things that are in the reconciliation package, and that the majority don't know anything at all. So do you think you need to do a better job at messaging, and going forward, how do you sell this if ultimately you have to?
Well, I think you all could do a better job of selling it, to be very frank with you, because every time I come here, I go through the list. Family and medical leave, climate, the issues that are in there.
That's kind of ballsy, isn't it? She's like, oh, it's up to you to sell my package, like talking to the media. And it's very indicative of how she feels like she owns the media. Like it is up to them to do the job for her. That's pretty wild, you know, but that's nutty Nancy for you.
And but it is true. It is hard to break through when you have such a comprehensive package. But as we narrow it down and put it out there, I think that it will. For example, one of the things in the bill is the continuation of the Biden tax credit, that is child tax credit, that is in the was in the rescue package. That has great appeal. Do people know where?
And she's stumbling and falling all over herself here because she hasn't really read the bill. She doesn't know what is in the bill, which is why she's having such a hard time. And she's probably drunk, to be fair, because she does that a lot.
It springs from but it is a vast bill. It has a lot in it, and we'll have to continue to make sure the public does. But whether they know it or not, they overwhelmingly support it. And by the way, women much more than men.
So whether they know it or not, the public overwhelmingly support it. I mean, this is like, you know, gaslighting by your government right here. This is her saying, oh, whether you know it or not, you want this. No, I mean, that's like an abusive relationship with your government right there. You know, I know what's best for you. You don't choose what's best for you. And so let's start looking at the deficit, okay? Nancy Pelosi was Speaker from 2007 to 2011, then again from 2019 to 2023. And so I've got the years that she was speaker highlighted here, and you can see that the deficit during the years that she was speaker, it shot right up. Now, some people they want to blame the president for the deficit, which really isn't fair. And the reason that really isn't fair is that all spending originates with the Congress. That's Section 7 right there, and so that's what it goes to. And so when you're looking at these two charts together, Section 7 of the Article 1 is all bills for raising revenues shall originate in the House of Representatives, with the Senate may propose or concur with amendments to the other bills. So the president doesn't really have control over the spending. What the president, has control over is like maybe policy issues and things like that. But ultimately, all bills for spending originate with Congress. So Nancy Pelosi, through that time, was the person who had complete control over spending. And so if you look at the spending she put together in those times with these massive omnibus bills that they just rammed through, that's where all this federal deficit came from. And it's a terrible, terrible thing. And so, that's something that our government has been really bad about, but it's been going on for a lot longer than Nancy Pelosi. And so to really kind of look at what got to the situation we're in today with the millennials and why they can't get by and everything else, we're going to take a trip back in time here. And we're going to go back with Bill Clinton way back in the day and listen to what he had to say, because I think this is really worth noting.
The thing that makes me angriest about what's gone wrong in the last 12 years is that our government has lost touch with our values while our politicians continue to shout about them. I'm tired of it. I was raised to believe the American dream was built on rewarding hard work.
See, there it is. Rewarding hard work. This is 1992 presidential Democratic National Convention, right after Clinton had accepted and everything. And he's, back in there with that same dream. We were raised on hard work. That language that has just been part of the American, language for so long. Part of the American way we talk to each other is that hard work. We're definitely all about that hard work. It's, all the way back to 92. That's very much the dream that this young lady was talking about.
But we have seen the folks in Washington turn the American ethic on its head. For too long, those who play by the rules and keep the faith have gotten the shaft. And those who cut corners and cut deals have been rewarded. People are working harder than ever, spending less time with their children, working nights and weekends at their jobs instead of going to PTA and Little League or Scouts. And their incomes are still going down.
Doesn't this sound familiar? I mean, it's the same problem in 1992 that they're talking about that we're facing today. Your incomes are going down, your revenues are going down, you're working extra hours, you don't have time to spend with your kids. Although I will say it is absolutely worse today because now people aren't having kids, they're working 2 or 3 jobs just to have an apartment. I mean, that's the thing about this that is really wild, the way that the younger generation is, because they have no money, they can't afford to be anywhere, they can't afford to live anywhere, they can't afford to buy houses. And so what Clinton is talking about here, though, with like that good faith with the government and everything else, is it goes back to this. I'm going to play a clip here from George Bush. And you guys, if you're old enough, you'll know this one. Hopefully you're not seeing this for the first time.
Read my lips. No new taxes. I will keep America moving forward, always forward. For a better America, for an endless...
Okay, so I'm going to just cut him off there. But that was George Bush. Read my lips, no new taxes. And then what did he do? He raised taxes. And, he made that promise during the campaign in 1988. And then a couple of years later, he went ahead, raised taxes when Congress forced him into it, because it was a Democrat-controlled Congress at the time. And so then, even going back before that, though, Walter Mondale, 1984, it's never
Mr.
been
Reagan
popular.
will raise taxes, and so will I. He won't tell you. I just did. There's another difference. When he raises taxes, it won't be done fairly. He will sock it to average income families again, and he'll leave his rich friends alone. And I won't stand for it, and neither will you, and neither will the American people.
Okay, so you saw Mondale's speech there. He flat out came out in 1984 and said he was going to raise taxes. And how popular was that? Well, it led to the worst blowout election in American history, where Reagan got 58.8% of the vote. Mondale only got 40.5%. And the Electoral College went completely to Reagan. I mean, Mondale got 13 votes out of the entire Electoral College. Reagan got 525. So that was the rebuke right there. The American people in the 1980s did not want more taxes. They're like, the government's getting too much tax already. It's a problem. We don't want to be doing this. We need to lower taxes, everything else. And it's really funny. And so when you look at what Clinton was talking about at that speech at the Democratic Convention, that's the thing. But then we run into a problem with Clinton. Let's see, I got to scroll to the right spot here. 1 second.
Really be unfortunate if realizing the fact that the people in Congress who voted for this plan had to labor under historically difficult circumstances. They had to reverse a plan of trickle-down economics in which it was the accepted path always to say the right thing but never to do it, and in which if you tried to do the right thing, people would say the wrong things about you and cloud the debate with a fog of misinformation.
And so what he's getting at here in the speech he's about to get into, this is from the signing of the 1993 omnibus deal. This was his first term, first go-around. And what he's fixing to tell everybody is, hey, by the way, we kind of alluded to the fact that we weren't going to do this, but we went ahead and we raised your taxes anyways. And so, you've got tax increase after tax increase 2 times around, and they're saying, oh, it's just only on the wealthiest Americans, et cetera, et cetera. But it was a terrible thing. The American people rejected it. And between that and the assault weapons ban that they passed that year, that's why the Republicans took the House the next go-around in the election. The American people seriously rebuked it. And I'm not going to make you guys sit through the rest of Bill Clinton because, oh my God, he's sleazy enough as it is. But there is someone else who I want to come in with who is endemic to the problem, going back to that original point she made in the video about the old white men. Well, the problem is it's not the old white men. It's people like this woman.
A dozen years ago, a young parent and educator traveled to Olympia to fight for a state schools program. A legislator told her,
"You can't make a difference. You're just a mom in tennis shoes."
Patty Murray won that battle, was elected to the Senate, and has become one of Washington's most effective leaders, earning the title of Legislator of the Year. Patty Murray fought powerful special interests and has succeeded.
I believe with leadership, real people can make this nation work again.
Patty Murray for U.S. Senate, a voice for real change, finally.
Okay, so Patty Murray from Washington State. She went to the University of Washington out here, becomes a school teacher who teaches preschool. She's teaching early childhood ed, winds up running for a state Senate seat, gets it, stays there for like 10 or 12 years. I don't know how long it was. And then in 1992, when that kind of blue wave came across the nation because everybody was pissed at Bush about the taxes and everything, she wound up hitching on to that and getting into the Senate in 1992. And so she's been there the whole time voting for all these things. And she has been one of the driving forces in the Senate because she has been one of these, bleeding heart feminists who wants to go out there and talk about how we need to spend all this money for health care and everything else. Let's just listen
I come to the floor to urge all of my colleagues to vote against this Republican bill that would undo President Biden's student debt relief plan and rip away relief borrowers across the country are counting on. It is hard to overstate how badly the student debt crisis has strained our borrowers and our families nationwide. And this crisis has been a drag on our whole country and our economy. It is holding people back from starting families or starting a business or buying a home or in many cases just making ends meet.
What is infuriating about this, her up here like playing like she had no hand in this at all, she went to the Senate in 1992. That means she was one of the people that helped create the student loan system that we have today. She had to help bring it through the Senate. She had to help write and pass those bills. She was an integral part at it, and she'd go out there and give speeches because, she's the mom in tennis shoes. She was a teacher. That's where she stood on this issues. Oh, she's a teacher. She knows what's best. Everybody needs an education, right? And because everybody needs an education, because she's going out there and pushing this through, it just sold everybody into so much debt. And now she's like, oh my God, this is so terrible. We have a student loan debt crisis. I'm like, you think you helped create this problem, and now you want to take and basically, quote unquote, alleviate these people, which really all they're doing is paying off the loans with tax dollars, so then everybody gets to pay for a piece of it rather than the person who borrowed the money. And it's totally messed up. And if we really want to look at like the swamp that she crawled out of, the way that the ideas that she has in her head wind up working in the end. Patty Murray was a state senator starting in I can't remember if it was late 70s or early 80s, but she was there for a good long time through the majority of the 80s. And then into the 90s, and then into the 90s, she went to Washington, D.C. And so, how is Washington doing today? Well, let me show you. This is how Washington is today. There's an affordability crisis in everything out there. People can't afford to live. You have people that are just basically dropping out of the system and living on the street and falling into drug use. And why is it that they fall into drug use? Well, people who go down that path, they've lost their hope for life. That's why they start getting high. It's because they don't want to feel the anxiety that comes with knowing that their life has a problem. And so that is why going out there and getting high has such an appeal to these people, because it is the escape from the reality. It allows their brain to break out of that box and to break away from all that fear and anxiety that they're feeling in needing to fix their life, because they literally have no way forward. It feels for them like no matter how hard they work, no matter what they do, there is no way that they will move forward with their lives. And this is absolutely incredible looking at this. This is all over Seattle. If you've ever driven through the area, everywhere you go from Seattle, Tacoma, Everett, it is all over this portion of the nation. There's hundreds of thousands of people living on the street here, and what's worse is other states have figured out that they will not do anything about the homeless people here, and so they've just started buying them bus tickets and sending them out here. So around every bus depot, that's kind of where the epicenters are, because these people just show up at the bus depots and then they kind of spread out into the community from there. Most of them aren't locals. They're just people that have come from other places in the nation who are looking for a place to stay. And the local news station has done several stories on this. There's one from a few years ago called Seattle's Dying. So, this is what this Democrat leadership has got us. This is where these people have gotten us. And what I would hope that this young lady that in the original video could understand is that this is where everything in our society is headed right now, because we are suffering such a disparity. And where does that come from? Well, there's a few different places that this whole thing comes from. The first thing that's really affecting us here, that is causing a whole lot of problems that I want to dive into right now, is we've got an invasion on the southern border. We have millions upon millions of people who are pushing into this country. And when we really go look at the numbers, by the years, as soon as Joe Biden came into office in fiscal year 2020, you just watch the numbers start to spike. And then it goes up again, and then it goes up again. He removed all of Trump's controls, because you could see while Trump was in office, the numbers were pretty low. He was doing everything he could to close the border. Between 2019 wasn't the best year, but the rest of the years, they were doing really good. Now you look at 2024 year to date, which is this gold arrow over here, and we are looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1.25 million, and that was as of January, because fiscal year starts in October. And so they're projected, with the dotted line going up to the top here, you're looking at about 3.75 million people alone this year crossing that southern border, which is absolute insanity. And so then they came out, we'll just cap it at 5,000 people a day. Well, 5,000 people a day is like 1.8 million people per year. That is not a compromise at all. And so for anyone who's out there today screaming about, they had a border deal and then Trump called it off. No, 5,000 people a day illegally across the border, that's insanity. That's still 1.8 million people. And why do they want to do this? Why are they doing this? Because they want to turn these people into voters. And they're doing some crazy things. They're talking about bringing these people who are coming here illegally into the military. They're talking about bringing them in and making them members of law enforcement. So what they're talking about doing is legitimizing these people and saying, hey, if you serve, we will give you a path to citizenship. So they're essentially looking to use them to enact all the nasty laws and everything else that they have, and also to turn them into a voting demographic. So this is a power play on behalf of the left, and it's really dirty, and it's disgusting, and it absolutely needs to be stopped. But above and beyond, carrying on from that, all these people, you bring 8 to 12, to 15 million new people. Some estimates even say as high as 22 million people into the country. All of a sudden now, that's more than the population of several states put together. And so you have all these people in the country now. Well, now they need food, they need clothing, they need housing, they need vehicles, they need gasoline, they need all these different things for their life. They're needing cell phones, and so the government, starting off, is giving them money. They're giving them all these debit cards, depending where you are. Some places it's $2,000, some places it's $8,000. It's just insanity. They're just handing our tax dollars to these people. And, you remember looking at the deficit before. Well, oh my God, what's going to happen when we're giving all this welfare to all these people who have entered the country illegally? And on top of that, now they're using tax dollars that were taken away from we the people and given to them to now go compete for the things that we need, which is driving up the costs of all the goods and services that we need. That's part of the reason why food is so expensive right now. That's part of the reason why housing is so expensive. And it's insane. We're even seeing things happen like right now at a couple of the VA clinics. They started kicking veterans out to give health care to these illegals. It's insanity, and we have not seen this type of insanity at the VA since Barack Obama was president. I would know. I'm a 100% disabled veteran. I've been through a lot of this in my lifetime. And so jumping from the illegals, let's get into the cost of living, housing, and wages, okay? And so basically from 2023 on, we've got numbers here. And so this is really easy to read, really easy to understand. But you can see this green line here. This is your average income. It's barely climbing. It went from just below $50,000 to just above $50,000. It's about a $4,000 shift in about 11 years, which is not a lot. When you really consider it, that is not a lot of money to go up in that amount of time. And so that being said, you start to look at these gold bars coming up here. That is the inflation rate. And so you could see over the years, 2021, 2022. 2022 was the year that inflation went insane. It wasn't 2020. It was 2022. And then you look at the average cost of housing in the United States, which is this orange line here. And it's just running away. It's running away where the average person just cannot keep up. How are you supposed to keep up with that? And so to give some perspective, because it's kind of hard if you don't really study this stuff and to understand it, I wanted to give you guys something that is just a little bit more easy to understand. And so I've got some numbers here, and we're going to take those numbers and say, and there's a reason for this, and I'll get into that in a minute, but based on the minimum wage, 40 hours a week, 52-hour weeks a year in 1964, you could buy 2,000 ounces of silver with what you would make in a year. So essentially, the yearly income at minimum wage would buy 2,000 ounces of silver, or 74 ounces of gold, okay? Imagine that, 74 ounces of gold in 1964 on minimum wage. That's insane, but that's what it is. Okay, so looking at that, now the silver line there is the equivalent 2,000 ounces of silver at the price for that year. And so you can see that silver, for minimum wage in 2015, what silver was going for was actually more than the average income in the United States. That's kind of crazy to look at it that way. You consider that silver, 2,000 ounces of silver, which is what that minimum wage for a year in 1965 would have bought you. And so it goes down, and then in 2021, it almost catches up again. So it's been paralleling just below. So that kind of gives you an idea if the money was still based on that silver standard, because the coins in 1964, a quarter was 90% silver. So 5 quarters from 1964 would get you about 0.904 ounces of silver. So it kind of runs it right in line there so you could see. So that's kind of interesting. And then looking at the gold, the gold is just barely above that, although a bit better. Gold has performed better. So I just wanted to put both of those on there as a metric so you could understand. On top of that, though, let's get into wages versus gold and silver versus housing. And I've got it all the way back to 1965. And it took a ton of time to get these numbers. Hopefully everything's correct. This was a huge research thing for me to put together. But coming in and looking at it, starting in 1965, I've got a few numbers included here. The orange line is the minimum wage yearly. So that's what your average annual income at minimum wage would have been throughout the years. and then your average income, and then the 2,000 ounces of silver, the 74 ounces of gold, and then the price of a house. So when you start to look at this graph, it's absolutely insane to see that minimum wage has just kind of paralleled the average income. I mean, it's below it, obviously, but then it just barely, like right here around the 2010s, they got really close, and then it diverged again. And it was really not good, that it's done this. It's been pretty flat. But when you look at like what silver did, I mean, for a hot minute, silver had a couple of price spikes in there where it just went crazy. Of course, obviously around the 2008, 2009 crash, after that, when people were worried about the monetary system, gold and silver, just went insane in price for a hot minute there. But then also, you can even see housing even after the 2007, 2008 financial crisis, where you've got that big dip at the end of in there. It still went right back up. And even after that massive crash, like, you think about how terrible, if you lived through it, you think about how terrible 2008 was, and for that to be the crash, and then for everything to just start going up and up and up again, it makes you wonder, like, when is the next crash coming? Because it's got to be there. I don't see any way around it. Because, these are the divergent paths we're on here, and it is really wild to see. And so that's what I had to show you guys today. I'm going to go ahead, dive into the chat. If you guys have any questions, want to see a slide again, I'll be happy to pop them back up there. But this is just kind of what I've been going through looking at it. I wanted to explain this to this young lady if she ever sees it, or any other millennial out there. If you got some value out of this, please do share it, by the way. So I'm going to go dive into the comment section now. So over on YouTube, Poor Dirt Farmer said, no one believes the lamestream media. Yeah, no, intelligent people don't believe the media. The problem is you do have a subset of not intelligent people who just take it at face value. They're like, oh, the news is the news, and what they say is the truth, and they don't question it. And there's like that whole thing floating around a few days ago where someone on Twitter put out a poll, and they were like, imagine you didn't have breakfast, how would you feel? And a lot of people responded, but I had breakfast. And so because they couldn't even picture that little bit of a hypothetical, they couldn't ask how they would feel. It was just, oh, but I had breakfast. They couldn't understand a hypothetical. And so that's where we really run into problems with that. And then another comment from Poor Dirt Farmer was, 2006 took out millions to this day to repay many of them another way of old draining the people of cheap labor, body blue, raised arms. I'm not entirely sure what you're getting at with that comment, but if you're referring to 2006 or 2008 or what there. So I'm not entirely sure. If you want to clarify on that comment, I'll be happy to answer it. But I think for there, that's all the comments we have on this. I'm going to pop open my Twitter just to see if anybody has commented over there right quick. And no, we do not have any comments over there. But this is the first one of these I'm doing. I am going to go ahead and cut this up and upload it after the fact. So appreciate you guys sticking around. Hope you got something good out of this. We'll catch y'all later.